Welcome to Beyond the Syllabus, where we talk with superintendents, curriculum leaders, and education innovators who are rethinking what school can be and how it can better serve the academic and personal needs of every learner. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Beyond the Syllabus. Super excited for our conversation today with Dr. David Miyashiro, who has served as superintendent of Cajon Valley Union School District since 2013. Dr. David Miyashiro was named by the White House and Department of Education as a top 35 district leader in personalized learning, has been featured in popular education publishing such as EdSurge and Education Week, as well as a popular speaker at national events such as AASA, ISTE, and South by Southwest EDU. David, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, excited to connect with you, Aidan. Thank you for having me.
Super excited for our conversation. Listen, I want to get things rolling here. We're in the heat of summer. I just got back from a really hot trip to the middle of the country. What is your favorite season and why?
Well, it's summer because the water's warm. I surfed D Street in Encinitas this morning, so it's nice to go out of a suit. How about yourself?
Favorite season for me, it's probably fall. Here in New York, I think fall is the most beautiful time of the year. Leaves are turning, weather's beautiful. But for all you San Diego surfers, go find Dr. Miyashiro out there in the summer. I love it. Well, listen, David, I'm super excited to talk to you today. Your background is not only impressive, but super thought-provoking and inspiring for me as someone who has dedicated my life to personalizing the learning experience and making sure every student gets what they need. I'm curious, before we go into kind of where you're at now, can you tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today and why you initially chose education?
Sure. So I started as a journalism broadcasting major at Long Beach State. I wanted to be on TV, be a newscaster, maybe, do plays and act. And back in the 80s, there weren't a lot of Asian people on television. So one of my professors said, David, if you want to make money, you should probably quit this major and do something else. And I wasn't offended by that. I don't think he was meaning to offend me, but, it was good advice then. And so my mom was a teacher. She said, well, why don't you get a sub credential? You can sub here at this school. And so I did that. And then probably should not have been a teacher. I'm not the most conventional, compliant person, which at the time, that's what they wanted. Questioned everything. Like, why do we do this? Like, don't we get a student's choice? Like, why don't this? And principals don't like first-year teachers who question everything. So,
no.
But I was that guy, and then became a principal, and then questioned authority, became an assistant superintendent, questioned authority, became a superintendent, and all of a sudden, hey, we get to make some decisions at this level. And
I love
the last 15 years, I've been able to lead an incredible group here in Cajon Valley, and our team has done amazing work here. I'm excited to share it with you today.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm super excited to learn more about it. And in true entrepreneurial spirit, just constantly asking questions and never accepting what is the status quo. Do you have any anecdotes about your teaching experience or school leadership experience where that got you into some trouble?
Well, I think questioning everything always got me into trouble. And the one thing that I learned is to listen to those with experience and that have been successful. So when I started teaching, there was this thing called whole language. And it was this concept of kids are going to learn to read just by being immersed in print. And it was a flawed philosophy. But the district that I was working in said, this is what we're doing, district-wide. And two senior teachers that were probably close to retirement, Rose and Nikki, they brought me in, this first year teacher said, David, this whole language stuff is crap. He said, you teach phonics. You teach systematic ways to teach kids how to read in first grade. And so I looked at my colleagues and I looked at Rose and Nikki. I followed them. And our kids learn how to read better than everybody else. But I think listening to those that have cut their teeth and done the right work. And then also, as I got to a place where I could actually make some decisions as a principal, going out and seeing innovation in other places. And you've had that experience, Aidan, by questioning and going out and seeing. And when you see things, you can't not see it anymore. You have to change it and you have to fix it. And so, yeah, I question compliance and still do. I think the measures and the metrics that we're currently reporting on are important, but should be reinvented. We've been using the same system since 1892. the committee of 10 produced this school system of, 8 years of primary school and 4 years of high school with content. We measure success by Carnegie units in time and content. And that's not what our employers are asking for when they're looking to recruit. So.
Yeah, this is all such good stuff. I'm curious what you think about this. I believe and am building my company under the pedagogical beliefs that we need to shift away from a time-based model to a proficiency-based model, and away from a subject-based model to a skills-based model.
Yeah.
To what extent do you use that language, and how do you feel about that in general?
So I'll share with you one more anecdote. And it was when I was a first year principal over 20 years ago now. I can't believe it. But when I was hired, it was at the beginning of No Child Left Behind, which was this heavy compliance, system where we actually had people walking in classrooms with clipboards to make sure that teachers were doing this on this day, and really awful. And everything was contingent upon standardized test scores.
Mm-hmm.
So I took over this school in Fullerton. It was a 100% Title I school, very high poverty rate, 100% English learners.
Wow.
And the school was taken over. The principal was fired as one of the sanctions of No Child Left Behind. I took over, and the superintendent said, do whatever you can to get this school out of program improvement. And so we became the New England Patriots of standardized testing back then when Tom Brady was there. And so we analyzed, how the students would be assessed. We looked at tests and we broke them apart. We reorganized our curriculum around the different questions that kids would be tested on. We taught kids test-taking strategies. We reduced arts. We reduced some of the most fun parts of school and doubled down on test prep. And over the 4 years that I was there, our school went from API of 521 to over 800.
Wow.
We became a Title I achieving school, and were celebrated in the newspapers and at the California Department of Ed. They actually sent proctors to make sure that our teachers weren't cheating. That's how well our
No way.
Yeah. And then we got, a party at Dave & Buster's, and this was back in early Dave & Buster's. This was cool.
Yeah.
And then we were sitting there celebrating and thinking, like, what did we win? We, the adults, are celebrating ourselves for exiting program improvement. And a couple years later, one of our teachers came crying into my office, red in the face. And she was upset because one of our students had gone to Texas to have a baby at the age of 14. And she came home proud. She brought her baby to our office and went to visit, Mrs. Ramirez, her favorite teacher. And she was proud to have this child. And our teacher was so upset. She said, she was an advanced kid. And she started naming kids that were dropping out of middle school, dropping out of high school, that were advanced on the standardized test. And she said, we did this to these kids. I mean, they're not going off to university. They're not thriving as adults, even though they passed the test. And that was the same year Sir Ken Robinson's TED Talk came out, 2005. And based on your revolutionizing education major, I think you probably have seen it several times.
Yep.
We watched that video as a staff and sat there and wept. We cried because we thought, one thing we should start with is do no harm. And we felt like at that moment that what we had did to our school to reduce it to a place where we taught kids how to take tests was doing harm. And we stopped. We just said, let's pause and let's talk to our students and parents about what they're hopeful about, what they want the school experience should be, because we never asked them. All we did was listen to the federal government, the state government, and then my district saying, improve your test scores.
Yeah.
Never did we ask the students. Never did we ask the parents. And what they said was, can you bring back the Ballet Folklorico? Can you bring back the music program? Can you bring back the video production? All the things that made school exciting for kids.
Yeah.
And then over time, just listening to other people, started to look outward at some of the best charter schools, the KIPP network, rocket ship schools, one-off private schools, to see what other schools were doing creatively. And that's when really my career changed from, listening to government and solving for community.
That's really interesting. the difference between academic achievement and student outcomes.
Yes.
Right? And the point you bring up of not once did we ask a student what they want that experience to be, not once did we ask a parent what they want that experience to be. And just thinking about entrepreneurship and startups, the number one thing you need to do as a founder is customer discovery, right? You need to identify a problem and then you need to go validate that problem. And you do that by talking to your customers. Well, in this case, you kind of have customers on either end of you, right?
Yeah.
You have a customer in terms of a board of education or a state department of education, but you also have the people whom you're serving, right? And how can we build a system in a way that meets the needs of both of those people? And it seems like that was the problem you experienced at that point in your career. Is that an accurate summarization?
It was the first time that we started asking questions of the stakeholders, and
Yeah.
and it never changed. It just got at a higher level after that as I got increased roles and responsibilities.
How did that learning experience, you say that's where your career shifted a bit. How did that learning experience translate into the work that's going on now in Cajon Valley?
Well, going back to the same school, so Richmond Elementary in Fullerton was a low performing school, ended up exiting program improvement, Title I achieving. That same year that we had that discovery, our superintendent, visionary guy, Cameron McCune, best boss ever, came back from a field trip to Mooresville Graded District in North Carolina. And he said, we're going to go 1-to-1. And we're like, what does that mean? He said, every child is going to have a computer for their learning. And this was back in 2004.
Wow.
And so the computers he was talking about was these multicolored clamshell Macintoshes. That might have been before your time, Aidan. I don't know.
No, I think it was.
But they were these, like, it looked like clams and they were multicolored. It was the first like version of a Macintosh laptop. And there was barely internet. There's hardly any software, but he was sold that this was going to happen. And so he said he needed 2 schools. One school was an affluent school at the top of the hill in Fullerton. And then I raised my hand. We want to try something different. And so for my school, like for my kids to have a laptop for their home and school use, they would never have that opportunity again if we said yes. What happened was both schools got their computers at the same time. The kids from the high affluent school, they were waiting for instructions. The teachers opened the boxes and the kids were waiting for the teachers to tell them how to open the app, and it was only Keynote, iMovie, GarageBand. There was very little to do. Our kids didn't wait. They just opened the computers and started hacking around and making podcasts and making like iMovies and they taught our teachers how to use it. And for the first time, our teachers looked at us and said, our students are genius, because they had an equal playing field. Both these schools got technology at the same time with no experience, and our kids just thrived while these other kids were waiting for instructions because of the way that they instructed in school in a standardized, compliant way. And so that led, me to be a champion of education technology and blended learning and the things that like healthcare uses technology for, to take out the blocking and tackling of healthcare so they can spend more time with the patient in, one-on-one in small groups. And that's what we did in the last several years, or decades, in my districts and schools. So technology won. But then when you have technology for every kid, you can do interesting things with curriculum. You're not bound to text or stagnant textbooks, and the world becomes the curriculum. And that's been an interesting endeavor as well.
I like that a lot. The world becomes the curriculum. That was one of the foundational thoughts I had when I was in high school and started in my geometry class. For some reason, that class really just twisted me the wrong way. And specifically the Pythagorean theorem. And as I'm sure everyone has had in their life, the thought of when am I ever going to use this just never left my brain. And I said, okay, if I had to learn this, like if you gave me no choice, which I didn't have a choice, but if you gave me no choice but to learn this, at least let me go stand on the baseball field on third base and imagine that my teammate at second base had the ball hit to him and he was throwing it to first base and I wanted to find the distance between third and first. At least let me go do that, right? And so that was my version of let my world be the curriculum, because the overwhelming feeling that I had throughout my educational journey is boredom, number one. And number two, I felt like I never understood the real world purpose of why we were doing what we were doing. And so for me, that's where my passion for personalized learning comes from, and just making it relevant and interesting to students, right?
Yeah.
And I obviously, as I mentioned in your introduction, named by the White House and DOE as top 35 district leader in personalized learning. What does that mean to you? What does personalized learning mean to you in your vision, and how does that look now?
I think in the past, personalized learning from a technology standpoint really utilized the best of what technology had to offer at the time. And in terms of assessment and programming, there's a lot that if we allow it, software can do to help assess and personalize curriculum for students, not just based on their level, but also their interest. So that's one way. But one of the things that we see now is personalization is about the human, the person. And so behind me, you see some pictures of our early TEDxKids ElCajon. We started a curriculum with the TED organization called TED Ed. And if you look at ed.ted.com, it's a free curriculum. They allowed us to customize it K through 12 so that starting in kindergarten, every student starts to tell their story. Not an 18-minute TED Talk to change the world, because kids don't have enough life experience yet. But every child can tell you what they're afraid of and what they're excited about. And if every kid has that opportunity to share in a TED-like talk in a kindergarten classroom, the kids get to know each other. They're accepting of one another. They start to learn about their cultural differences, and community is built. And so when you have community and kids do know each other deeply and well, you don't see bullying. You don't see, all the things that you're afraid of that would happen to young people in school. But the other thing is kids learn that their story matters, and that as first, second, third grade, they start to build in their interests and their strengths and their experiences into their talks. Then they start to shape their version of a resume that is building online. So our kids, if they've gone through the program, have TED Talks from kindergarten all the way through senior year that can show how they get better at speaking, but also how they evolve as a human. And based on our World of Work, our career exploration curriculum, they really start to shape their career and their employment path starting in kindergarten. And it evolves over time, and it changes over time based on experiences.
That's one of the most unique education programs I've heard of. That's really, really cool and inspiring. And I wish I had that opportunity as a student. I would have eaten that up, David. That would have been awesome. When did you guys implement that?
12 years ago now. This was our 12th year with TEDxKids ElCajon. So we have a global event where we invite people and we have speakers on stage and have a TED-like event. But what we learned is that limits the ability of only 20 speakers per year to do it. And so with TED, we said we want every student in every grade, every class to do this every year. And so they allowed us to personalize our curriculum to, our district.
That's amazing. That's really, really cool. What's one of your favorite moments from that? Favorite stories from it?
Oh, we cry every year, whether it's a funny talk or, a real moment talk. One of our students gave a TED Talk about 4 years ago, and she was a product of the foster care system. And she talked about, don't feel sorry for me. And she talked about her journey and what she learned and having to live with different families. And you hear the hardship and it was heart tugging, hearing her journey. But then she got to the moment where she got the call from the person she was living with, said, "You're going to be my daughter." And everybody just lost it, right? And she said, be a foster parent if you have time. And she put out the call to action.
Wow.
And it but there are moments like that, right? And this child, you would just think, if you didn't give an opportunity to speak, would never know her story. And now it's celebrated.
That's amazing. That's so powerful. The thing that strikes me the most about this opportunity for students is they simply get to express themselves as individuals. And I think that opportunity is lacking in education. Very, very rarely is a student presented with the opportunity to really express themselves as an individual, right? And because of that, I think students also don't learn how to express themselves as an individual. And we see that we see the social implications of that, right? I think that's a really, really unique value add for that program. That's really cool. I would love to come to one of those events one year.
Oh, please. It happens every spring. So April or May, and we'd love to have you.
There we go. I'll be there. That's awesome. So I read a little bit about your World of Work initiative. Can you tell us a little bit about that, when that started, what it is, and how that looks today?
I could tell you exactly when. So, Aidan, we talked about like asking stakeholders. When I started here in Cajon Valley, my first meeting outside of the district was with our city manager, and he's retired now. But Doug, at the time, I met with him and I said, my board wants me to get out and get to know the community. And so I said, Doug, you oversee the police department, fire department, public works, everything that's taxpayer funded except the schools. If you were over at the schools, what would you have us do? And he looked at me. He said, Miyashiro. He called me by my last name on the first meeting. Said, you guys got to stop stigmatizing the most important work in this country. And he referred to, in San Diego, we have the Marine base, we have the Navy base, we even have, Air Force base. He said, there are civilian and non-civilian jobs right here in San Diego that we cannot fill because you have this college for all mentality and don't even show these local options as part of, the high school experience.
Yes.
You stigmatize it. Teachers stigmatize, oh, you're not going to a 4-year college? Well, you know what? If you enroll in the Navy or the Marines, they will pay for your university and you'll be able to graduate, serve your country, and have no debt. How about that?
Yeah.
And then he talked about in East County, San Diego, where we are, about 15, 20 miles east of the coast. We are home to the largest real estate and commercial development companies in the country, not just San Diego. And skilled labor, auto tech, all the different things that they need, they can't find enough talent. And these are high wage, high demand jobs. It's not like, they'll be making like $15 an hour. No, these are $75 an hour jobs right out of high school. And these companies will pay for your kids to get certifications in plumbing and in welding and whatever it is that they need. And I left that conversation with like, what am I supposed to do with this information now? We're doing everything wrong, according to the city manager.
Yeah.
And so he put me in touch with a couple admirals, with our, Department of Defense, the police chief, the Chamber of Commerce, and they all said the same thing in a different way. You're not providing the talent we need. You're stigmatizing the work that we do, and you're preparing these kids for this future that's really, it's a false narrative. And so instead of trying to translate that to my community, I invited the leaders that I spoke to a meeting with our principals and our school board and had the conversation together again. Because if I tried to translate that, it wouldn't have landed well. But having all of our internal stakeholders hear from the city manager, from the police chief, from the Department of Defense, from local business on what they wanted in terms of talent, and we were the talent pipeline, it was misaligned. And the other thing that happened that year was our kids would go on a field trip to BizTown. It's attached to Junior Achievement. Have you heard of BizTown?
I haven't.
It's a 5th grade experience that a lot of states have, where kids can go on try on a career for a day. And there's a curriculum where kids have to fill out a resume and apply for a job, and they get to be part of this fake city for a day. And our students would say that's the best day of school ever.
I bet that they would, yeah.
And then 8th grade, our kids got to go on a field trip to Qualcomm, which is a giant tech giant down here. And on the top floor of one of the skyscrapers in Sereno Valley, Ed Hidalgo, who was formerly our chief innovation officer, created this experience called the World of Work. And it was a one-day experience where 8th graders got to go to Qualcomm and be dressed up and be fed like amazingly well. But they got to explore all the different careers at Qualcomm, not just engineering, but culinary, legal, patents, advertising, marketing. And he had the kids take this short assessment where kids unpack their individual strengths, interests, and values. And he said to them, each of you have a place here at Qualcomm. Some of you will be engineers, but some of you who are creative are going to work in advertising. Some of you who are persuaders are going to work in human resources. And our kids left that experience feeling like, I'm going to work there. And the only problem was only 30 students per year could go because they served all the other school districts as well. So given my conversation with the city manager and leaders, and then seeing this experience, I took my board to Qualcomm and said, let's create a curriculum where kids can have this as part of their core instruction. And so we invested millions of dollars into the development of the world of work, starting in kindergarten, just like our TED program, where kids try on and explore careers in a project-based way, meet professionals who do it, get to demonstrate their learning in front of an authentic audience, and then reflect. Did that feel like a career that I would want to do? Why or why not? Well, I'm realistic. I'm hands-on. I don't want to sit in an office. I wouldn't want to be a computer programmer. Or I'm not great with my hands or fine motor skills. I like solving problems and using math and science. I should do that. And so every grade, every year, our kids try on careers. They unpack it. They utilize that in their TED-like talks and then develop their story so that by the time they start freshman year at our high school, it's very intentional.
That's amazing. There's so many thoughts spiraling in my mind right now that come from that. One is the notion you mentioned that most kids leave that day thinking, I'm going to work there one day. Mm-hmm. And that's such a powerful moment because they are seeing the value of what they're doing today and how that will translate into tomorrow. And I know for me as a business owner, as a founder, by far the most inspiring and energizing moments I've had is when a student finishes a class period using our platform and asks me if they can come work at Unique Learn.
Oh, that's cool.
That is it is the most amazing thing because it's not only like, oh, okay, cool, you liked the product, but it's like you see the work, you see the value of what's happening, and something clicked in your mind. I don't know what it was that you did in that assignment, but something clicked as to like, yes, this is what I've been missing, right? So that was the first thing you made me think of. The second thing is, you've mentioned this a couple times now, the value of understanding a student's interests, a student's strengths, a student's personality, their character, this holistic view of a student, right? That's the approach that I've taken in our development and in my vision, but also I think the approach that's lacking generally in education. I think it seems obvious when we talk amongst each other to say it, but it's not obvious in terms of what the system reflects, that students are more than test scores. Students are more than a GPA. Students are more than a diagnostic result. But it's programs like that where you're actually reflecting that. And I think that that's lacking in a lot of areas of education. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's a reflection of what's measured gets done. We measure English language arts, math, and science in a couple grades, and graduation rates.
Yeah.
That's it. We don't measure the things you just described.
Yeah.
And we should.
We absolutely should. And I hope this will excite you. And I imagine that your response is going to provoke me and excite me. But there's a paper I read a couple years ago before I started the company, and it was called the 4-phase model of interest development. And it basically put forth scientific framework for understanding how something progresses from a new stimulus to what they refer to as a well-developed interest or a passion or a hobby. Mm-hmm. So phase 1 was a brand new stimulus supported by a third party. In this scenario, a teacher, right? A teacher is bringing something up to their students that they've never heard of before, they've never talked about before, they've never seen, etc. And, teachers bringing it up, it's part of the lesson. Students are maybe paying attention, maybe not. That's phase 1, right? Introduction of new stimulus. Phase 2 is the teacher, the third party is still supporting the existence of this stimulus, but students are now leaning in, right? Something piqued their interest. Oh, all right. Well, I'm in class. I might as well listen. Oh, okay. I'll participate in this lesson, right? But it's still not to the point where, like, if the teacher stopped talking about it, then it's out of sight, out of mind for the students, right? Phase 3 is the biggest jump. that support from the third party is no longer necessary. It's something that has piqued a student's interest enough to where they're carrying on the existence of that stimulus outside of that initial environment. Whether that means talking about it with their friends at recess, going home and asking their parents about it, doing research on their own, watching YouTube videos, etc. And then phase 4 is, again, what they refer to as a well-developed interest, something that is core to who they are, something they really care about, they spend a lot of time with, they're passionate about, it's their hobby. And so using that framework as a means to, one, ask ourselves, how can we embed that in instruction, in curriculum, so that we are putting together as many phase 1 and 2 environments as possible as a means to growing the denominator and increasing the outcomes of phase 4 interests. And number 2, how can we track that? Right? Because I agree, what gets tracked gets done. And right now there's no way to track the more qualitative side of the student experience.
Well, that's a big question. I love the challenge on that. So I'll tackle that. I think that we started with the analogy of food. So let's say we want our kids to be culinary experts. We can't just say, do you like, Italian cuisine, Asian cuisine, Middle Eastern cuisine, if they've never tried the food. They can answer and they can look at it. So it's important that the kids actually eat more than once in a variety different things, to be able to say and reflect, this is why I think this. And to your point, some of the kids on some of the food are going to be all in and be at that level 4. Whereas some of the kids try it, it's like, that's no. But then when they try the next cuisine, Mexican food, right up my alley. But then the other kids, it's going to pique certain kids' interest. So with career exploration, there's a time-tested vocational identity, a tool called the RIASEC. And if you look at the world, are you familiar with it?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have kids experience at least one career around each RIASEC code every grade, and they can't say, I don't like it, it's not like me. We tell you, you're 6, you can't say you don't like it till you've done it.
Yeah.
The kids can't foreclose on those things. And what we see is as kids start to explore the different careers of forensic analysts, civil engineer, things that they've never even heard of before, they start to gravitate towards certain things like that. I really liked. And then by the time kids get to 8th grade, we say, okay, high school, it's up to you now. You know enough about yourself to say, this is where you want to spend your time learning. This is where you want to spend your time in the work-based experience. And these are the things you want to actually start to pursue for your future career. And it's different. And the challenge in California, at least, is our A through G requirements, where kids have to take 4 years of this and 3 years of this. It's all the same, standardized. It's backwards according to the model you just shared. Kids should be spending time in their area of strength and interest. So if I'm going to be a doctor or a mathematician or an engineer, you better take high-level math and do these things, high-level science. But if you're going to be a composer or a director of, in motion picture, you shouldn't be doing the high-level math. You should be doing this. And I think customizing and personalizing the experience before kids leave high school is important. And that's what we're trying to do here.
I completely agree. And I'm curious as to how that's playing out. And we'll continue this conversation offline 100%. But I think the A through G requirements, first of all, just gave me PTSD because growing up in Southern California, every single classroom you sit in has the A through G requirements taped to the top of the wall. So thank you for bringing me back to that.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
But yeah, I think I have long held the notion that if we identified and focused on a student's strengths, interests, and passions, instead of having a room full of people disengaged with things they don't care about, we would have a room full of experts. Imagine a world where everyone is an expert at the thing that they care most about. And they are not forced to do the things that they don't really care to do or aren't strong in, right? Why do we place so much emphasis on, no, you need to know this level of calculus, this amount of Shakespeare, and this amount of details about both world wars? Wouldn't you rather have someone who knows everything about this, everything about that, another person who knows everything about that, and another person who knows everything about that one, right? So I completely agree with you there. We need to focus on those strengths. And how can a student learn to identify a strength? And then how can a student leverage that strength?
Amen. We preach to the choir, brother.
Amen. There we go. It's a problem solved, right?
Yeah.
Almost. Yeah, David, this work is so cool. And I love, through everything you're saying, I get a strong sense of entrepreneurial spirit. And it goes all the way back to when you were telling us about your origin, about you were just constantly questioning, right? And what are things that, as you've progressed later in your career, what are some new questions that have started to come up for you?
One of the things that I'm working on now that I was inspired by a couple years ago was what's happening in Switzerland. So the Swiss education system, you're nodding your head, you're probably familiar. 70% of all high school students in Switzerland are in paid youth apprenticeships. 70% of all high school students are in paid youth apprenticeships. The other 30% are on what's called the Swiss academic track, where they've already predetermined what the credentialing and schooling is needed for their career. They figured that out already. And kids can move back and forth. It's not a track, it's fluid. So every child is on the career track. Indiana, as a state, have been sending teams to Zurich for their Summits Institute for the last 10 years.
Wow.
Funded by the Fairbanks Foundation, to learn from that model so that they can solve for Indiana what Swiss solved. And the problem that the Swiss had was that in the 80s and 70s, kids would graduate from university and leave to go work. They were not retaining their talent as a country. And so business was actually the one that came in and said to education, you need to fix this to help us, maintain our status as a country in the economy, in the global economy. And so the Swiss government aligned the whole system around workforce development and interests and making sure that kids, and they call it sniffing in the middle grades. And it's really like exploring different things so that you can, pursue something and be paid for it. So in Indiana, the model is the kids will earn high school credit, college credit, and income in high school. Every kid, not just some kids. And they have the 3 E's, and the E's stand for employed, enrolled, or enlisted. You're familiar.
I just spent the last 6 days in Indiana with a few of our districts. So yeah.
Oh man, right. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's not after high school. It's they've fixed their transcript and their diploma so that kids will be enrolled in the military, are enrolled in post-secondary, enlisted in the military, or employed before they leave high school.
Yep.
And so that's not something I created. Somebody else did, but I'm looking at that saying that's where we're going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so to be entrepreneurial, you don't have to have your own original ideas, but you have to be willing to go out and look and see what's happening other places. And Indiana, in my opinion, is where the best education is happening right now. Do you have an experience?
Yeah. So the reason I am aware of the RIASEC stuff is because in East Central ESC, shout out to Pat Haney, he's the director there. We took a tour of their facilities where they have a bunch of different, Pat, I'm sorry for butchering the names of these rooms, but different like career-oriented rooms according to the different RIASEC codes. And, in those rooms are 3D printers and ambulance simulators and doctor stuff and artist stuff and podcast recording studio, like all these really cool career explorative stuff, all aligned to kind of that RIASEC framework there. And yeah, just spending time with a lot of the Indiana superintendents and districts is super inspiring. And obviously we feel really blessed to be able to work with them and help deliver towards that mission. So I agree with you. Indiana's got some really cool stuff going on from an education standpoint.
So Pat Haney and Taylor and that team came over to our World Work Summit, and they've toured our schools. And then they went out and they like 10x'd us, like, cause we have the RIASEC in our classrooms, but what they built there, I've been in that center.
Well, you have?
Yeah. Last year I made a trip. I like, you guys like 10x'd us.
Like, it's amazing. When did they come see you? Was it this past April?
They started coming before the pandemic. And then we actually had, annual summits and tours because folks interested in early years career development come learn about the world of work from us. But what Indiana has done with it is like amazing.
Yeah, they've done some cool stuff. Yeah, that's super cool that you know them and that you've actually been to that building. That's awesome. Yeah, wow, that's really awesome. So listen, I want to transition the conversation a little bit here into some leadership topics. Obviously, you've been superintendent at one district for 13 years, far surpassing the average tenure of a superintendent. I think that speaks to one, your vision on education and your willingness and ability to think progressively, think innovatively. But two, inevitably has to do with your ability to lead a team and build a culture in a community. Can you talk about some leadership principles that you've learned over the course of your career and kind of the culture that you've tried to build at Cajon Valley?
I think starting there is culture, and that's important. And so half of my doctoral degree was at the School of Education at UCLA, but half of it was at the School of Business, and we learned how to run a company. And so the best companies treat their employees as their first customers. And so we obsess on our employees. We measure employee engagement and happiness with tools like Gallup, and then tools we created on our own now. And we invest in team building, and we want to be the Savannah Bananas of education, right?
Love that. That's awesome.
It's just fun and engaging all the time for everybody and supportive. And we've created a corporate culture where employees can make decisions. They have discretion. And that's not the case in most places. And so we've been able to attract talent, but we allow talent to create and innovate. And although we have a broad vision of happy kids and healthy relationships on a path to gainful employment, each of our 28 principals in their schools can put their unique stamp on it and create an outdoor immersion school or a performing arts focused school and achieve it in different ways to give our families choice.
That's
you don't have
awesome.
to go to a charter school. You have different types of, specialty schools within the district.
I like that. The Savannah Bananas of education. I'm a big fan of that. Big fan. And yeah, that's so powerful. I feel like public schools oftentimes corner themselves into, no, we're just a public school. If you want something else, you have to go elsewhere. When that's the exact opposite of what should be the case. There should be optionality and customization and personalization within, right? That should be the whole model, right? When I say back to our earlier conversation, when you were a principal at that former school, how can you meet the success criteria of both the stakeholders above and below you, right? And with that comes a structure that offers a malleable approach, right? How can my structure change based on who I'm serving, right? I would never come to this podcast conversation with the same list of notes and questions as I would go to a different podcast. It would just never happen, right? That's not how you talk to someone. So why is that how we teach someone? Why is that how we serve a community? So can you share more about maybe some of those different options that families have, that students have within your district?
Yeah, we have an outdoor immersion program where the kids spend a lot of time outdoors and field trips. We have a couple of fine arts and performing arts magnet schools. We have a couple computer science magnet schools. We have 2 dual language schools. Basically, what the parents have asked for, we've tried to create in different ways, sometimes within a same school, but based on interest, we've created some that are specialty schools. So there's a variety.
Amazing.
Yeah.
How many schools are in your district?
We have 28.
28 schools. And how many were there when you started?
26.
Okay.
And we didn't have a high school. We used to be a K-8 district, but we created our own high school in 2020, based on demand. And I would love for you to come see our high school and also participate in our TED event.
Yeah, I would be absolutely honored and inspired. By the way, starting a high school in 2020 is a whole separate topic of conversation that maybe we dig into in a part 2 here, but I'm sure that came with a whole whirlwind of everything. So we'll save that one for now. But as far as building that culture, giving employees discretion, putting them in positions to make decisions and be creative and take initiative. What are some leadership principles that you try to instill kind of maybe at the very top of the district? And how do you see that trickle down all the way into the classroom?
I think one of the first principles I learned is, and one of the mentors we had, it was Horst Schulze. He's the creator and founder of the Ritz-Carlton company. And I'll share just a 30-second commercial of the next segment maybe, but we reopened our schools in April of 2020. At the beginning of the pandemic, in a high poverty area, all of our parents had to work still. They didn't have the option to stay home. And so our children were left at home with nowhere to go. So our teachers union actually was the one that said, we need to figure out how to open our schools for these kids. So just 3 weeks into the pandemic, we welcomed small groups of families back based on their needs. And then over time, by June of 2020, all 28 schools were open. Horst Schulze was giving a lecture online on Zoom. And as I was talking with him, he shared, "You're a public school." And he said, "Why are you guys closed?" And I said, "Actually, sir, my schools are open." And he said, "Well, why are the schools in Atlanta closed?" And I said, I can give you my plan, but I cannot open those schools. I don't have the jurisdiction. But he took us on as a client because he saw what we were doing. He said, "You are delivering impeccable service. That's what we do at the Ritz-Carlton. Every person that walks on our grounds, no matter if they're a customer or not, we treat them as ladies and gentlemen." And he showed us the service standards of, how his employees deliver that. And there are actually 20 standards. So one is if a customer comes within 6 feet, you look them in the eye, you ask them, "How are you doing today, sir?" And whatever this response is, you care and you address whatever their response is. And we've employed that across our district. But what he also said is, my employees want to do it. And how do I get them to want to do it? He said, because we treat them like that too. He said, when we have a new employee, we have them stay with us and stay in the room, and then we cook them the meal, and then we bring them to the family and say, "This is what we're about." And then they go out, they want to do it. And so learning from him and learning from Google and some of the like Southwest Airlines, we've employed those principles, Savannah Bananas, Jesse Cole, into our leadership philosophy here on obsessing over the employees, creating room for discretion, and then delivering on promises. But the key question is, if you ask somebody, "What do you think?" honor the response. So we asked the question of our teachers 3 years ago, "What do you spend your own personal money on that you would wish the district would take care of?" And we took those top 4 things and we took them off the top. One of them was food. We want access to snacks and healthy things that we don't have to pay for in the teacher's lounge and wherever. So we did that. They asked for Teachers Pay Teachers, which was a curriculum company that provided online resources. We bought a district-wide license for that. They wanted toys and fidgets for the primary classrooms for like prizes for their kids. And they wanted candy.
Wow.
They said, "We spend money on candy that we give to kids during the school day." And then like our child nutrition department was like, "We can't do that." I'm like, they're going to spend the money anyway. It's not like we're going to stop that.
Right.
The teachers give kids candy. So let's give it to them. But when we asked that question and we actually delivered on what the survey results said, it's like, oh my gosh, employees are engaged.
Yeah.
They believe that when the district asks a question, they actually care. And so that's the culture we have. We ask questions, but when we hear responses, we deliver on what the response was.
That's amazing. One of my friends recently asked me a question that it wasn't the first time someone had asked me, but it was the first time someone worded it this way. And he asked me, "What are your inputs?" Right? And what he meant by that are, what are the things you consume on a daily, weekly, monthly basis that fuels either your work, your energy, your thoughts? And just talking to you now for the last 50 minutes or so, the inputs you have are amazing. And the inputs that you're giving me right now are amazing. So I really appreciate all of the stories that you're telling. I can't believe you opened your school 3 weeks into the pandemic. That is unbelievable and spectacular. And I'm sure has had and will continue to have such an amazing compounded effect on your students and families. So kudos to you, because that, I've never heard of that. I don't know anyone else who did that. And that relationship and story with the Ritz-Carlton, and how do you drive your employees to want to do that? Right? Not what scare tactics do you use to get them to do that. Not what measurements do you use so that they're afraid they'll get fired. No, none of that. Why do they want to do that? And I think that's the question that I want to end on today as far as students is, it's not how can I get my kids to pay attention? It's not what game can I put in front of them so that they're locked in. It's how can I get them to want to do this? Right? That intrinsic motivation. This is really good stuff. I think we absolutely need a part 2.
Thank you. That was fun. Yeah, likewise, Aidan. What you shared was inspiring to me. I can't wait for our follow-up conversation after the podcast.
Likewise. David,
I'm going to finish with one more. Yeah.
Yes.
So based on what you just shared, Laszlo Bock, he is the chief human resources officer for Google for a long period of time before he started his own company. His philosophy was, it's about believing people are good or evil. Do you believe people are good or evil? Because if you believe people are good, you will trust them with information. You will include them in decision making. You'll share resources with them. You'll trust them with assets. If you believe people are bad, you'll withhold things from them. You will not include them in decision making. You'll micromanage them. And so do we believe people are good or evil? And that's the principle that Horst Schultz have. You believe your employees are going to do the right thing, so you treat them this way, not the opposite. And for students too, are children good or evil? They're good. They're born good. So let's give them space and give them discretion and invite them in and let them surprise you.
100%. Let students surprise you. I love that. David, any final thoughts, any places where people can find you, where people can support you and the work you're doing at Cajon Valley?
No, our district, and I give all the credit to our employees. All the work that we've done is because of amazing women and men here. CajonValley.net, and you can find me on LinkedIn, X, and Facebook, and all the others too.
Awesome. David, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you, Aidan.
Thanks for listening. Got an idea, a story, or a question about what we discussed today? We'd love to hear from you. To learn more about Unique Learn, follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube, and visit uniquelearn.co.